On a typical London afternoon, as the sun set behind the imposing towers of Buckingham Palace, no one could imagine that a simple selfie would result in one of the most shocking scenes ever witnessed at that historic location. Sergeant James McAllister, mounted on his majestic horse Thunder, embodied the personification of British discipline. His stoic features, shaped by 20 years of service to the crown, remained impassive as he observed the sea of tourists gathering in the square. The scarlet uniform and the bearskin helmet glimmered under the evening light, while Thunder, an impressive thoroughbred, stood as still as his rider. Years of rigorous training had transformed this duo into a true living work of art, admired by thousands of visitors daily. The gentle breeze carried distant laughter and the constant sound of camera clicks as groups of awestruck tourists captured that centuries-old spectacle. Children pointed in fascination, elderly ladies commented on the British royalty, and tour guides narrated stories about the tradition of the Royal Guards. However, on that specific afternoon, fate had in store a meeting that would forever change the way the world views these iconic figures of British royalty. What was about to happen would prove that behind that apparent immobility there is much more than a mere show for tourists. Among the crowd gathering in the square stood Juan Rodriguez, a Mexican tourist who drew attention wherever he went. With his vibrant green national shirt and a characteristic smile on his face, he moved unsteadily among the visitors, clearly affected by his extended afternoon in the traditional London pubs. In one hand, he held a bottle of premium English beer, as if it were a trophy. In the other, he wielded his smartphone, capturing every moment of his adventure for his followers on social media. His friends followed him at a distance, alternating between nervous laughter and worried glances as they filmed his increasingly bold behavior. The heavy accent from Guadalajara echoed through the square as Juan narrated his great London adventure, gesturing exaggeratedly. His expression revealed that typical confidence inflated by alcohol, completely oblivious to the solemn environment surrounding him. For him, that moment seemed more like a party than a visit to one of the most respected locations in England. Little did he know that his quest for likes and views was about to cross all acceptable boundaries of prudence and respect. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. Juan began his approach with a series of exaggerated poses, getting closer and closer to the mounted guard. "Hey buddy, let's take a picture together," he shouted in broken English, staggering toward Sergeant McAllister and Thunder. "Look at this. The guard doesn't even blink," he exclaimed to his friends who continued filming. Juan rehearsed some Mexican dance steps, spinning around the horse, his beer bottle swinging dangerously in the air. Some nearby tourists began to step back, realizing that the situation could deteriorate quickly. "Is he real? He looks like a robot," Juan teased, moving even closer. Sergeant McAllister maintained his impeccable posture, although his years of experience alerted him to the imminent danger. Thunder, for his part, slightly moved his ears, a subtle sign of unease that only his experienced rider could notice. A middle-aged British lady tried to intervene. "Young man, please keep your distance. This is not a joke." But Juan, immersed in his own performance, completely ignored the warning. He approached even closer, making faces and provocative gestures for the camera. "I'm going to make him smile, guys. No one has ever succeeded, but I will," Juan declared, his voice slurred by alcohol, as he positioned himself for what would be his most memorable and potentially fatal selfie. The atmosphere in the square changed drastically. What began as just another afternoon of tourist photos turned into a tense spectacle. Dozens of smartphones pointed at the scene, no longer capturing the traditional royal guard, but documenting an impending disaster. "He's going to hurt himself," a young woman murmured to her friend, while other visitors exchanged worried glances. The circle of onlookers expanded, creating an improvised stage for the unfolding public drama. Groups of Japanese tourists stopped their usual photos to observe the situation, while British families tried to pull their children away from the scene. A nearby tour guide interrupted his explanation about the palace's history. his attention completely focused on the confrontation that was developing. Juan's friends, who had initially laughed at his antics, began to show visible concern on their faces. One of them tried to call him, "Juan, that's enough. Let's go." But his voice was lost in the growing buzz of the crowd. The air was thick with tension. Some more experienced visitors, who already knew the strict rules of the Royal Guard, began to step back, anticipating that this situation would not end well. Whispers of, "This is going to be trouble," and "someone needs to stop him," echoed through the square, while Juan, completely oblivious to the signs of danger, continued his reckless performance. The crucial moment arrived when Juan, in his quest for the perfect selfie, took a fatal step. Staggering dangerously close to Thunder, he lifted his beer bottle in a forced toast gesture. "Let's drink together, officer," he shouted, his drunken voice echoing through the now silent square. In his altered state, Juan didn't realize he had crossed the invisible line of safety. His beer bottle wobbled dangerously close to Thunder's snout as he tried to balance his phone to capture the ideal angle. The amber liquid swayed threateningly near the pristine uniform of Sergeant McAllister. The crowd collectively held its breath as Juan stumbled over his own feet. For a moment, it seemed he would regain his balance, but the bottle slipped from his clumsy fingers. The sound of glass shattering against Thunder's hoof echoed through the square like a gunshot. Glass shards scattered across the ground, and liquid splashed onto the real animal's legs. The cut was instant, and a red line began to form on the front leg of the majestic horse. Thunder, trained to maintain composure in virtually any situation, could not contain his natural reflex in response to the sudden pain. The next scene would happen so quickly that the spectators would barely have time to process the events they were about to witness. Thunder reared violently, his front legs cutting through the air like blades. Sergeant McAllister, despite all his experience, was taken by surprise by the animal's instinctive reaction. His years of training kicked in automatically as he struggled to regain control of the frightened horse. Juan, still smiling and unaware of the gravity of the situation, tried to step back, but his compromised reflexes betrayed him. He tripped over the scattered glass, falling onto the historic pavement of the square. His phone flew from his hand, landing a few meters ahead, still recording the entire scene. Panic spread through the crowd like wildfire. High-pitched screams cut through the air as nearby tourists scattered in all directions. Children cried, adults shouted alerts in various languages, and chaos took over the once orderly square. Thunder, still agitated by pain and confusion, continued his dangerous dance, his powerful legs threatening to crush anything or anyone in his path. Sergeant McAllister, maintaining his professional composure even in that critical moment, used all his strength and technique to control the nearly half-ton animal. Juan remained paralyzed on the ground, his previously cheerful face now a mask of pure terror, as Thunder's hooves cast threatening shadows over his head. For the first time that afternoon, he realized the seriousness of his actions. Within seconds, 2 additional officers emerged from their positions, moving with military precision toward the chaos. The first focused on containing the panicked crowd, while the second rushed to assist Sergeant McAllister with Thunder. Juan, still sitting on the ground and now completely sober due to the shock, watched in awe as Sergeant McAllister, with an impressive display of equestrian skill, finally managed to calm Thunder. The horse, still trembling slightly, lowered his front legs, although blood continued to drip from the cut. "Don't move," one of the officers ordered Juan, his voice carrying all the authority of the British Crown. 2 Metropolitan Police officers who had been patrolling nearby were already running toward the scene, their radios crackling with calls for backup. Juan's friends, who moments before had been enthusiastically filming everything, now tried to hide among the crowd, but were quickly identified and detained by the officers. Their smartphones, containing the incriminating evidence, were confiscated as proof. A royal veterinarian was immediately called to attend to Thunder, while Juan was lifted from the ground and handcuffed. His face, once radiant with alcoholic joy, was now pale and marked by a mix of shame and fear. The reality of his actions began to weigh heavily on his shoulders, along with the prospect of serious legal consequences awaiting him. At the Westminster police station, Juan faced the seriousness of his situation. The officer interrogating him methodically explained the multiple charges: public disorder, disorderly conduct, animal cruelty, and damage to royal property. Each accusation felt like a new weight on his conscience. "What happened today could have resulted in a tragedy," the officer explained, his tone stern yet professional. "Thunder is a highly trained animal, valued at over $150,000. The cut on his leg requires specialized treatment, and you endangered not only the animal but also Sergeant McAllister and dozens of innocent tourists." On the other side of the interrogation room's glass, his three friends awaited their own questioning, all visibly shaken. Their smartphones had been emptied of all content related to the incident, which would now serve as evidence. The Mexican consul had already been notified of the incident, and diplomatic implications began to unfold. Juan's tourist visa would surely be revoked, and he faced a ban on returning to the UK for several years, in addition to substantial fines and possible detention time. In the police station courtyard, reporters were already gathering, eager for details about the incident that was rapidly going viral on social media. The selfie tourist, as he was being called, had unwittingly become the latest example of what not to do in London. Subscribe to the channel and like to access more stories like this. In the days that followed, the incident gained international proportions. Videos of the incident, captured by dozens of tourists, went viral on social media. The hashtags Dashak Royal Guard and Dashak Selfie Tourist dominated the trends on Twitter. As heated debates about irresponsible tourism and respect for cultural traditions spread across the internet. Juan's case became a teaching example used by tourism agencies worldwide. Tour guides in London began to specifically include the incident in their initial briefings to visitors, emphasizing the importance of respecting the protocols of the Royal Guard. Sergeant McAllister received a commendation for his exceptional display of control and professionalism during the crisis. Thunder, after receiving proper veterinary treatment, was temporarily removed from service for complete recovery, generating even more outraged comments on social media. Juan, after paying a substantial fine and spending 48 hours in detention, was deported to Mexico with a 5-year ban on entering the United Kingdom. His story was widely reported in his home country, where it became a topic of debate about appropriate behavior abroad and individual responsibility. In his last interview before leaving London, Juan, visibly remorseful, stated that he never thought a selfie could cause so much trouble. He learned the hard way that some traditions need to be respected, not turned into a joke. He apologized to the British people and especially to the Royal Guard.